John, we've got another great guest this week. It's the president of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies, Dave Dombrowski.
Really looking forward to this one. He's won pennants in 4 places, World Series in 2, a certain Hall of Famer, and a guy that we've known for a long time. Really good guy. So should be a good interview.
One of the things we'll delve into with him is the trade deadline. You and I think some sparks might fly. I don't know that we agree on everything on Ohtani, what the Mets should do, what the Yankees should do, what the Padres should do, etc. And we'll do hit and error if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. John, 2 weeks from today, I assume we're going to be really busy for the New York Post, for MLB Network. We'll be working the trade deadline, 6 p.m., August 1st. Look, not that long ago, we were wondering if there were going to be enough sellers, right? And already the Cardinals and Mets have jumped in. We didn't know that a few weeks ago. I think Boston has probably begun to define itself as not a seller and maybe a buyer in this. I think everybody's watching Angels and Padres. What's going to go on there? Because they've got, both of those teams have special players, right? Ohtani would be the most special. And just how far would the Padres go? Would it just be guys like Hader and Snell, which would impact the market greatly, but they're walkier guys? Or would they go as far as to put Soto on the market and see if they could recoup kind of like prospect base what they gave up, or major leaguers or whatever? You know the market as well as anyone, John. Go wherever you want with that.
Yeah, I mean, the speculation is what's going to make this. I'm not sure we're going to have a lot of great players traded, but we're going to be able to speculate on whether they may be, at least. I think Arenado, Soto, and Ohtani are the biggest names that have already been speculated. Arenado, I think, is very unlikely to be traded. The Cardinals really never sell, and if they do sell, it's not going to be a superstar. I really would be shocked at this point if it was Arenado. I know he said at the All-Star game that he couldn't be shocked. He'd only be surprised if he was traded. But I think I'd be shocked if Arenado was traded. Soto is not that far off of that. I just don't see the Padres doing that with a year to go. They could trade him over the winter if they need to, or next trade deadline potentially. So I think that's a long shot. The Ohtani one is the one that I think is really going to drive this. I mean, that is the interesting one. He is the greatest player now. He may be the greatest player ever. He's having one of the greatest seasons ever. I don't think that WAR number of 6 point whatever is doing it justice. He wins games single-handedly. He's incredible. And at this point, it is logical to trade him. They probably should trade him. It's not easy. I mean, if you're the owner, it's not easy to be the guy who trades Shohei Ohtani, but it's not Babe Ruth. It's not the same situation. Babe Ruth was sold for $100,000 or so when he was 24 years old, and there was no free agency, so he was going to be a Yankee for as long as they wanted him.
A Red Sox for as long as they wanted him.
But right, he could have been, but when they traded him, he was going to be a Yankee forever, basically, right? I mean, he wasn't going anywhere, so the value was much higher of him, realistically, and there was no real impetus to trade or sell him. I guess he wanted to produce no net. At least that's the
it's a great story.
I don't know if it's true or not, but in any case, it's not the same thing. And I get it. Artie Moreno does not want to be the guy to trade Shohei Ohtani. He wants to sign him, and if he trades him, certainly the chances to sign him, they're probably 5% anyway. They diminish further. I think they're at that point close to 0%. So I get it. But if you're a baseball person, I don't even have to ask. They're baseball people. They're going to want to trade him. And it makes sense. They probably should trade him at this point. I thought so last year. I thought they could have gotten a ton last year. They could still get a ton. I mean, he's performing even better. I know it's only a half year, but whoever gets him is going to want to use that 2 to 3 month period as a courtship to try to keep him. And there is enormous value to that. So I still think they could get a huge prospect haul back, and they should deal him.
Yeah, well, the reason I mentioned the Red Sox is like the Red Sox didn't have to trade, net, regardless. They didn't have to trade him. They could have controlled him because of, to your point, no free agent for his whole career. Right. Like when people say Artie Moreno doesn't want to be the guy who trades him, it's really, to your 5% thing, it's really he's not going to have Shohei Ohtani on his roster next year anyway, in all likelihood. So like trading him isn't like this giant stain like the Red Sox selling Babe Ruth when they could have just controlled the greatest player ever for the rest of his career. And, you have to decide, like, over the next 5 years, what's the right thing to do? Unless you had a really high certainty that he wants to stay, and they'll never have that high certainty. I do think you have to cash this chip. He is, to your point, John, we're talking on a Tuesday morning last night. He's like Aaron Judge, like was last year. You kind of expected him in that big situation, his team down 3-1, to hit a home run, like it's almost on call. And by the way, he then goes out and pitches like Garrett Cole, like he's both guys. And for the last 60-ish games of the season, that has at least 2 to 3 great prospect return as part of it, even though he's going to be a free agent. And I just think the Angels have to roll that dice, as painful as it is.
Yeah, we all did expect him to hit that home run. I'm not sure why Aaron Boone wasn't expecting him to hit that home run, but that's a story for another day. You're absolutely right. He is a combination of Cole. In fact, he's outpitched what Cole did last year, and he's equal to what Judge did last year at this point. Now, Judge had a huge second half. We'll see. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Ohtani.
Second half starting off pretty good for him.
Yeah, I'm not thinking. And if he gets traded to a National League team, maybe he wins the MVP in both leagues. I think he has the American League MVP wrapped up. Even if he gets traded to a National League team, he's the American League MVP. We've never seen that before. We've never seen anything this guy has done before. I couldn't even believe the batting practice I would see in the WBC in Miami. It was incredible. And then he won it as a reliever, blowing Mike Trout, his teammate, away with a 100-mile-an-hour sweeper or slider or whatever.
Can we just stop on incredible. That? Your point about Trout is, I think that at bat, seeing like these big moments like against the Yankees last night, I also think teams could feel relatively comfortable that this guy isn't going to blink in a pennant race. Like, he hasn't had the pennant race with the Angels.
Oh, he can win. They're not winning because of him.
It's right. I also think he kind of like is one of those guys like Bryce Harper. Will be talking later to Dave Dombrowski. I think Bryce Harper wants the big at bat in the big moment. Right. I think that there are certain people who say it and they're kind of whistling in the graveyard. I think this guy wants the biggest moments to come to him, both on the mound and at the plate.
Yeah, he's not about the money. He wouldn't have come when he came and made a fraction of his worth. Even this year at $30 million, he's an incredible bargain. And before that, what did he make last year? Like $6 million or $5 million? I mean, he's not about the money. He wanted to prove he's the best player in the world. He's done that, and he wants to win now. So, I think this is ultimately why people think the Dodgers are the most likely. They're the ones who are the most consistent winners, and they are on the West Coast. It does feel like. And again, no, he's not confiding in me, you, or anybody else that we know. But 5 out of the 7 finalists were on the West Coast last year. He picked the Angels, which is a pretty comfortable one. I know the Yankee people, when they were told by him that, he loves the pinstripes, but I can't see myself in a big city. They think he probably wouldn't go to L.A. because that's a big city. I don't know. I mean, he's in Orange County already. We're talking 45 miles away. I think that's the favorite, but certainly teams like San Francisco, Seattle might be appealing. It was kind of eye-opening when he said at the All-Star game, at the press conference, in the middle of the game, that he'd spent 2 winters in Seattle. I mean, why did he do that? I mean, I think he might like those kind of mid-market teams. So John, it's going to be interesting to see.
It's an area you know better than me. You've got a much better head for business. I think one of the things we have to come to peace with is, like, what is his value off the field to people? Because if it is as great as some have in their imagination, really he's a 29 market player, right? Like if some of it, whatever he costs, 50, 60, whatever it goes to, if it's defrayed at a certain amount because you could do business, in Asia, in Japan in specific. And look, I think it's pretty clear Steve Cohen wants to open up the market for his hedge fund in Japan, and he's an owner who sees it as just one pile of money. He doesn't say, this is the money we make on the baseball team. If he makes an extra $1 billion in Japan because with his hedge fund, because he has Ohtani, he's going to be like, okay, so say I gave him $700 million. I just netted $300 million because I have this guy. So I think he's going to be, as hard as this to believe, equally fascinating as a free agent, because I think that, I think it was quiet last time how hard the Reds tried to get him. Now, it was at a time where he didn't cost a lot of money. But again, if you could imagine that he's going to defray the cost, I think he becomes a 29 market team or 30 market. I'm going to include the Angels also. It isn't like I'm throwing the Angels out of this.
Yeah, possibly. I do think Steve Cohen might have a little bit of edge there, as he's got more money than anybody else, and he's clearly intrigued by Ohtani. I'm sure everybody is, but I will not be shocked if I'll be a little surprised if Ohtani decides to come to New York after apparently telling the Yankees that he isn't that enamored with the idea of a big city, but. Steve Cohen's clearly going to make a play here. I mean, there's no question about it. He's obviously a fantastic businessman. Thing is, let's say he makes $60 million a year with 110% tax, then you have to add another $66 million, right? You're talking $126 million for the teams that are in that Steve Cohen tax territory. And I get it. He could probably trade off some other pieces or whatever, but he's going to be in the Steve Cohen tax territory. And that is 126 million. We don't know what he makes in terms of marketing, what he makes in terms of what it could help with his hedge fund or whatever. But we do think that, I think, and you suggested it, Steve Cohen's going to be involved in this. I don't expect they're the favorite, but I do expect they'll be involved. The Yankees going to be involved. I see the speculation that they're going to be the most aggressive on the trade front. I think they were last year. I think they really pitched in last year, and they had pieces that intrigued the Angels last year, at least the baseball people, before Artie Moreno said, no, we're not trading him. And I get it. I understood that last year. But to sign him long-term, can you see Hal doing that? I don't know. He went and signed Judge, which is great. But to then add Ohtani now, I'm not sure that he's going to be quite as motivated as Cohen and some of those teams on the West Coast.
Look, we're talking about, let's pivot to the New York teams a little bit. When you talk about, are the Yankees motivated to do this, John? Like, after Ohtani helps the Angels win the Monday night game, the Angels are only 3 games behind the Yankees. The Yankees are in last place. We're asking, is Boston buying or selling? Boston's ahead of the Yankees. Like, at this point, what is justified? Like it's hard to trade everything for a guy like Ohtani, who you don't know you could keep, without the short, like, he obviously would help a lot towards getting them to the playoffs, but it isn't like they're a lock and they're like this. You don't want to trade for that player without a strong belief you're going to make the playoffs. And John, they have a lot of sickness on that team. There's a lot, like, they blew out their bullpen in the first half because nobody but Cole could pitch more than 6 innings. And by the way, they're stupid about it. When they have guys pitching well, they pull them instead of protecting the bullpen. They're always running to the bullpen. So I'm not sure what the Yankees should do here. I think that they should give up very little for walkier guys, or only make trades for guys who can help them beyond this season, because this is not a good team right now.
No, they're a bad team right now, and their hitting is unbelievably bad. Obviously, we both adore Sean Casey. We'll see. It's only been 4 games. So far, it's a continuation of the first half, but it's early. But what if they? I'm speaking hypothetically now, because I don't necessarily agree that they're going to be the most aggressive for Ohtani. I'm not sure where that came from, but I'm sure they're intrigued like everybody. What if they got Ohtani and they have a rotation of Cole, Ohtani, Rodon once he gets going, and right?
What's Rodon? What is Rodon?
Well, we'll
once
see.
He gets going? That was a bad signing. Like I said in the offseason when they signed him, I'm going to stick with that. It was a bad signing.
Well, it's only been 2 starts, which it doesn't. Right. It's not a great thing that it's only been 2 starts, but we saw what he did last year.
I think they're a lost organization. I think they make a lot of bad decisions.
Well, certainly, obviously the Donaldson trade, we can go over all of them, I guess, right? The Hicks signing, the Donaldson trade, the Severino's signing, the trades, the Gallo trade, they're in a slump in terms of their moves lately. But, and I don't necessarily think that they're going to be the most aggressive in trade, as I said. But what do you think of that rotation? People build for October with rotations. If you have Ohtani and Cole, and I know you don't like Rodon, let's say Cortez comes back. Still, it's still a pretty exciting rotation for
It's
October.
very exciting. They still have to send the guys up to the plate that they're sending up to the plate. It would now include Ohtani, and they would hope Judge, and that's pretty good. So they would have
how bad can you be with Ohtani and Judge? You can't be that bad.
I don't know.
Right?
The Angels have been pretty bad with Ohtani and Trout. So I think you could be pretty bad with the two players. I'm like watching the team, and there's nothing inspiring about it. And again, probably we would have said that about the Phillies at this time last year. Right. They went to, Game 6 of the World Series. So maybe they'll turn it around. But I think if you believe the Yankees are going to turn it around, it's based on pedigree. Like, I just don't think anything you're watching looks like high-level baseball. I think it's like when Aaron Boone just repeats over and over again, everything we want is still in front of us. I'm like, dude, change the script a little bit.
Yeah, he's been kind of Pollyanna. I would agree with that. His post-game, he's way too positive and optimistic about what's gone on. At some point, you've got to say, you got to look at reality. I'm sure he's looking at reality, but you've got to reflect that in some way. So you're right about that. Let's move on to the Mets, though.
Their manager has been less Pollyannish about it.
Yes, he has. Right, and I get it. There's nothing Pollyanna about it. I mean, they're well under 500. They're in a much worse situation, and I know Fangraphs has got them at 13% to make the playoffs. I don't know. I mean, am I the last holdout that says don't sell? I just don't see the point of selling. What are they going to get? They're going to get nothing. The only thing they could possibly do. I mean, certainly if you trade Robertson, you could get a team's top 10 prospect, one guy. That's something. Is that worth giving up the season for? The other thing you could do, since it's Steve Cohen and he's willing to eat money, and we've seen that before, is he could basically buy prospects from other teams by just paying for the contracts of Scherzer and Verlander. Obviously they make $43 million.
I did think it was interesting that like I wrote about it the other day, John, is Buck Showalter. It was interesting. It was in a press conference. Nobody kind of heard it except for me, I think, because I went up to him afterwards and asked. He just said, like he was talking about Quintana being moved to Thursday and that Quintana had the flu. And then he goes, and we wanted to get one more start for Verlander this month. And it hit me like, well, what's it matter what month Verlander starts in? And when I asked him about it, he's kind of like admitted, like we probably want to showcase the guy one more time. It would be 3 more July starts for the deadline. I would assume that means they have at least some nibbles on it. I think I'm generally with you. They're very difficult guys to trade for a variety of reasons, including that the Mets want to be good next year. And maybe as crazy as it sounds, because the problem this year, Verlander and Scherzer might be their best options to be good next year. I will say, I wouldn't throw away, like David Robertson got traded last year for a guy who could be a number 4 starter in the major leagues. That's what the Cubs got back for him in Ben Brown. Like, to me, that would have great value for the Mets moving forward, considering they can't reach down to the minor leagues and even get a number 4. Like, at this point, like David Robertson, having a good closer on a burning house isn't valuable to me. Like, I would try to trade that chip. I try to can Tommy Pham get me a 7th or an 8th inning guy moving forward? Their farm system.
That's very boring. I'm sorry.
I get it's boring, John, but they can't. But I agree with you that it's incredibly boring. But they can't reach down to this minor league system, and I don't think it projects to this for 2024 and get good young arms. They didn't develop them, so I think they have to go into other team systems and make the right trade to add a couple of arms, even if that makes me and you and all their fans going to Citi Field for the last 2 months a little more miserable. I do think they have to take whatever parts they can and try to add arms into the system.
Okay, I don't think I like Tommy Pham. He's having a nice year. No one was paying him $5.5 million. I don't think they can get anything for Tommy Pham really to speak of.
I think you could get a 7th inning arm.
No, I don't think so. But in any case, I'm not willing to give up on the season.
The Mets gave up Cole and Holderman for Daniel Vogelbach. Right now, they'd be wise to trade Daniel Vogelbach for Cole and Holderman. It would I don't see why the Mets
doing that. Yeah, Pittsburgh's not going to do that, by the way.
Right, but my point is, you can get a Cole and Holderman like player for Pham, who's actually more valuable than Vogelbach.
All right, let's wait a week. I think the Mets are just doing their due diligence with the extra start for Verlander. They're just preparing for the possibility and maybe even likelihood that they become a seller. I can't see them as a seller today. Now, if they go 3-7 over the next 10, I guess I will change my mind. But The only way they will actually get real prospects back is if they pay the whole contracts.
But I'm not talking about getting real prospects back. I just want to be clear before.
I don't want non-prospects back.
But I'm not saying non-prospects. I'm saying useful pitchers. One of the problems of their 2023 season is they can't reach down to the minor leagues. Billy Epler threw 10 pitchers at the wall. A lot of Dominic Leone, Tommy Hunter, Eliza Hernandez, like Jeff Brigham. Like, he threw them at the wall. All of them didn't stick. At some point, you have to be able to reach down to your own system and say, hey, we got a guy who throws 97 down here. Let's take a look at him. Do I think you could get a guy who throws 97 with a chance to pitch the seventh inning for Tommy Pham? I do. Do I think you have a guy could turn David Robinson into a guy who could be a number 4 or 5 starter? It was done last year, so I think you could. So, like, to me, I'm not talking about exciting anybody, including me and you. I'm talking about being practical and having some arms for next season.
Yeah, if I were the Angels, I'd be practical because you could get a ton for Ohtani. You could not get anything for Tommy Pham. I'm sorry.
But again, you're missing. Why can't you get? Can you get Colin Holderman level player for Pham?
No, I don't.
You can't get a Colin Holderman. The Mets, Pham is no worse than Vogelback, right? Why
that was a terrible deal. I can't see. We're now predicting other teams to make terrible deals like the Mets.
If you were the Yankees, would you trade Greg Weissert for Tommy Pham to play left field?
I'm sorry. I like Greg Weissert. He's a Long Island guy. I'm not giving up the season for Greg Weissert. I'm sorry.
Giving up the season?
Well, that's what you're saying. You're saying to start a sale. If you sell, you're not going to make the playoff. You have zero chance. Fangraphs is saying 13%. Well, I don't. I've watched the team, and I kind of don't think it's 13%. I'll give them 10%. I'd rather play it out than the only sale that would matter is if Cohn just paid the contracts down.
I agree with you.
And traded Scherzer,
something really good. I agree with you.
And you paid, let's say, $30 million down, and you're giving away a Hall of Fame pitcher for $15 million. And then you might be able to get a good prospect back.
Again, I'm not expecting them to get a good prospect back. I'm expecting them to get useful pieces back and try to make something out of this.
Okay, we agree to disagree. I'm not giving up the season for a couple of useful prospects. So
I think the Mets have given up the season already.
Well, if they sell today, you're right. I have more faith in them that they're going to give it at least a few days.
I do. I think they'll go right to the deadline. They'll know what they could do for each of these players and wait till like July 30, 31, August 1st. I'm not disagreeing with you there. I don't think they do these trades today, but I think where they're arcing, I think it would be negligence not to turn it into something useful moving forward.
I agree. They're definitely looking at trades very carefully, and I think they're trending that way. And I think it's more likely that they end up selling. And, like I said, I might be the last holdout, but at this moment, I'm not thinking sale because I know what their sale is going to be. It's going to be dreadful.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be back. We still got a Tuesday before the Tuesday. I'm sure we'll be talking about this next Tuesday. But I also know that we'll be talking about this with Dave Dombrowski, what his Phillies are up to at the trade deadline, and he joins us next on the show. John and I are so happy to be joined by Dave Dombrowski, the president of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies. Right time, right man. You've been a constructor of 4 teams that have won pennants, and your team won it last year. And your team feels like it's having a very similar year this year, Dave. It didn't start great, but since early June, you've got the second best record in the National League, which I suppose defines what your mission is in the next 7 to 10 days to improve your team. I wonder if, even just broadly, what do you think you need to do to improve your team for the stretch run to take another shot at a World Series?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And secondly, I do. We're in it. I mean, we're in a situation we're going to try to make the postseason because I think if you make the postseason, I'm not pretending we're going to catch the Braves at this point because they barely ever lose. So I hope you have to beat them in a short series at the end of the year if we get to that point. But and you never again can tell what happens. But I think it's an interesting case because a lot of we have played well for an extended period. We were 7 under at one point. And so when you look at where we're 16 above since the beginning of June. And a lot of our how we do will be dependent upon our big guys. Some of our big guys haven't really had that outstanding first half of the season that you look for them to have. So guys like Bryce Harper and Trea Turner and JT Realmuto and being in a position, Kyle Schwarber at times, he's still hitting the home runs, and they've picked up a little bit here, even the start of the second half. But if they come on and have the type of second halves in which we're accustomed to having, a lot of the pieces that we need will be taken care of right there, because that gives us a lot more offense at that particular time. Because some of our complementary type players, when you start talking about Bryson Stott, you talk about Alec Bohm, you talk about Brandon Marsh, and of course Castellanos has had a good first half. Well, they're all doing very well at this time. So for us, one of the keys there is Bryce Harper's ability to play first base. Because if he can go from DH to playing first base, which we think he will be able to do, and we'll be able to have that answer by this trading deadline, we're in a position where that will allow us to move Kyle Schwarber then to the DH position on a regular basis. And that would allow us to try to add some type of combination out there in the outfield, probably in left field. Now we've got some young guys. We picked up Christian Pache, who's coming back off of minor surgery. He's been very good for us. We just brought up a youngster by the name of Johan Rojas from AA. Probably not ready with the bat, but as good a defensive outfielder as you'll see. So we'll have to determine what we want to do in that regard. And then just like everybody else, you're always looking for pitching depth. I mean, our basically four starters, which are doing very well for us, and Wheeler and Nola, who are the big two, they've pitched well, but I think they can continue to even pitch a little bit better. We have Suarez, who's pitched very well for us, Taijuan Walker, who's pitched well for us. And the fifth spot, Christopher Sanchez has slipped in there and done very well for us. So we're pretty good in that regard. Our bullpen's been real good, but we can always use depth because you never know what happens over the last couple of months.
Dave, thanks so much for joining us. I think the Phillies are now the third team, the two New York teams, the third team where we've had three guests. We had Rob Thompson and we had Sam Fuld. So we appreciate the Phillies, and we do appreciate you for coming on. I do want to ask you about Trea Turner. I mean, he looked like a sure bet as a free agent. You've had very good success with free agency throughout your career and in Philly as well. Obviously, Castellanos struggled a bit last year, his first year in Philly. I mean, is it Philly? Is it Philly being a tough town? Is he trying to prove something? I think everybody thought you, I don't want to say bargain, but, you know, you paid a fair price for a guy who's been a great, great player.
Well, great question. I think if we had the 100% answer, we would try to correct it immediately in some ways. But first of all, I mean, Trea Turner's a great player. We know that. And he hasn't lost his skills. He can still fly. He's as fast as about anybody in baseball. He's played well defensively at shortstop. Maybe he has a couple too many errors, but again, early in the year, kind of getting settled. He's made some great plays here recently, and his bat has started to take off. I'm not really sure why the slow start for him. I don't know if he's trying to do too much. He's a very conscientious individual. He's a very hard worker. I wouldn't surprise me if he's trying to live up to those capabilities. And part of what we're working on was, hey, just relax, be yourself, because we know he's a great player. He doesn't have to hit the ball out of the ballpark, use the opposite field. So I think it's a combination of all those factors. Now, over the last month, I would say he's been more like Trea Turner that we would anticipate. He's stealing bases again on a more regular basis. He's getting on base. He's starting to hit the ball the opposite way. So I think it's more that combination. It isn't like he's lost his skills and forgot how to play. And I think that, you know, he has scuffled in the beginning compared to what he would normally be. Castellanos did last year. He's corrected himself in that regard. He's come on and had a real good year. But we also, you look at a guy like Taijuan Walker, who's joined us as a free agent, has been tremendous. He's 11-3 and throwing the ball very well. Schwarber last year led the league in home runs coming over here. So there is a mixed combination, but there's a lot of eyes and attention on Trea, and I think he'll settle in and continue to be one of the best players in baseball.
Well, Taijuan Walker had the starter kit, right? If you could work in New York, you could probably work in Philadelphia. So he had that going in. Dave, you brought up one of, I think, the big issues of the second half, which is Bryce Harper playing first base. We're talking on Tuesday morning, you begin his series. Is he going to play as early as today, Tuesday? Do you know the day where he's doing it? And more important, what gives you belief that this is something he can handle and give that opportunity to you to move Schwarber to DH and go and get maybe an outfielder?
I do not think he'll play today at first base because we were off and we had kind of a crazy weekend with a split doubleheader on Saturday and a whole bunch of rain on Sunday. So he wasn't on the field a great deal at that time. But I think he'll play relatively soon. I can't give you the exact date on that. And I think it'll be one of those where all of a sudden there's a lot that's involved. I mean, Bryce is a great player. He's very prideful. He'll just one day say, hey, I'm ready. He's been cleared medically for us to do that. So that part of it, we feel comfortable. I've watched him take infield and really build up ground balls and then take infield and do throwing and just watching him. He's a natural athlete, as we know. He has played infield in the past. He's caught. He's very knowledgeable about the game. He's just instinctive. And as I've told him, and we were saying, I've seen him throw even at this point. And when I go back a month, he might be the best throwing first baseman in baseball right now. That's how good his arm is over there. So, I mean, even coming back from the injury, and it'll be just a matter of when you're trying something new, when he ultimately says, hey, I'm ready. And I think he's pretty close to that. Now, who knows? Maybe it doesn't happen, but we'll know that prior to the trading deadline. And maybe that changes what we need to do at that particular time. But my belief is that he'll do it. And it'll be important for us because, Kyle Schwarber gives you everything that he has. He's a tremendous, he's a threat. But he's also in a situation where for him moving around in left field, we didn't sign him originally to do that on a regular basis. We thought he'd be a DH, but just coincidentally, after a month of being with us, Bryce had the injury and has had a DH for 2 years. So I'll look forward to moving him into that situation where he can play DH more.
We are getting close to the trade deadline, and I just want to follow a little bit. I love your team. I know I think a half game out as we do this of the wild card. I did predict you to win that division this year. The Braves do look pretty unbeatable. It did sound like your rotation is pretty good. You're very good. So at this point, you'd be looking more like I guess a fifth starter would be what you're looking for specifically. And then also maybe a right-handed bat or something. Is there anything else that you would be targeting beyond that extra starter in the depth area?
Well, I think we're a situation which is, if we stay healthy or relatively healthy, and we'll get a couple guys back, Alvarado and Sir Anthony Dominguez back in the next couple of weeks. And our bullpen really has been a strength for us all year long. It's deep and guys have pitched well for us. Sanchez has pitched very well for us as our fifth starter. He's pitched consistently well and given us quality starts. But it's a situation where when you start looking at the depth aspect of it, I'm not sure. I mean, we do have a guy like Bailey Falter who's starting out to throw the ball real well at AAA. Got Nick Nelson who protects us at AAA. McAble is a quality young pitcher, and so is McGarry. They're quality young pitchers, Griff McGarry is. But it's a situation as, any of them could come up and pitch for us. But would that be what we ideally want if we had an injury? Well, that's what we'll have to determine. And it'll be one of those where that we'll look at the depth, no question about it. I think everybody looks at depth maybe than another occasional club or two. So that's what we'll look for. And the right-handed bat would be more a kind of a replacement for us losing Rhys Hoskins earlier in the year. So if we had another right-handed bat, but then yet when you look at our lineup versus left-handed pitching, well, we've got Castellanos, we have Turner, we have Realmuto, we have Bohm, you have Harper, you've got Schwarber. We've got the platoon in center with Marsh, and Pache has really done a good job for us. So there's really not a lot of spots that fit. Stotts hit left-handed pitching very well. He's a good player. So I think for us, it's just a matter of what makes us better as we go through. What do we think can make a difference? And of course, be talking to clubs. We've already started, like everybody else, talk to clubs and see what ends up happening.
You mentioned a lot of your pitching depth potentially. I'm wondering if you could update us on where Andrew Painter might fall into this. He's had a setback, right, as he was building up. And also, you did a very interesting thing by getting Noah Song, who I think you probably have to make a decision on pretty soon, right, if he's going to be put on your roster, because if not, he has to be offered, I believe, back to Boston. Where are you with those two pitchers?
Well, Painter did get a setback. He ended up having a little bit of pain in his elbow. He has just begun throwing again. And I think we're in a position where we're just feeling that out ourselves. And so we're hopeful that he'll be okay. I do not know that at this point. We'll wait and see. I don't think, though, he's in a position based upon where he is at this point that we could count on him as depth this season, because by the time he's in a position, even if he comes back, he builds back up, goes out there and proves that he's healthy. I think it's too late for that at this time period. We love him. I think he's going to be one of the best pitchers in baseball as time goes on. But from a depth perspective this year, I would say can't count on that. In Noah Song's case, you're right. He is going to go, and he's at Double-A right now. He's at Reading. He's going to pitch 2 innings today for us. We're bringing him back as a bullpen guy. Really doesn't have the ability to stretch him out to be a starter this year. So you're bringing him back as a bullpen guy. His last day on injury rehabilitation assignment is the 27th of July. So we'll have to make a decision at that point if he'll be a guy that still in consideration if we would bring him back to our big league club. And of course, even before you return him to Boston, you're in a position you have to bring him through waivers at that point. I'm not so sure he'd get through waivers the way he's throwing the ball at this point. So we'll wait and we'll see what happens.
I know this is probably not top of mind at the moment, but I know Phillies fans will be interested. I know you tried to extend Aaron Nola in the offseason. What are your thoughts about trying to keep him a Philly long term?
Well, we love Aaron Nola. He's a great pitcher, a tremendous individual. He's been a Philly since day one. He's somebody we'd love to keep in the organization for a long time. We tried to get it done in spring training. We were not able to get a deal done from both sides of it. We both tried. So I'm sure it's something that we would re-engage in once the season is over. We really don't get into those in the middle of the year. He hasn't wanted to do that. And I don't think it's a good time to do it with players either at that point. So, but we love him, and he's not only a good pitcher, but a quality individual. So we'll see what happens.
You mentioned it before, Dave. You guys were 25-32 not that long ago, beginning of June. Since then, you have the second best record in the National League. Only Atlanta, who you mentioned never loses, has a better record than you in that period. John mentioned it. You're a half game out of the wild card. You're one whole game of being the top wild card team. It's bunched up, with Miami, San Francisco, and Arizona. I'm wondering, did last year help you running this and the group as a whole to understand kind of the length of the season and not to go into a panic at 25-32 and to believe in the product that you are a good team and would come out of this?
I think so. And I think the difference is that it led them, I think they thought they could do it, but now they know they can do it. So I think that there is a difference in the mindset. So we have a very not only talented group of players, strong mentality. They're battlers. We started off slow. I'm not really sure why we started off slow the last couple of years. This year, I think there are different factors. We didn't play particularly well early. We never had our club together during spring training. We had 15 guys that were involved in the WBC. And even though I'm a big advocate of the WBC, JT, who's working with some new pitchers, didn't have the opportunity to do that. Walker was slow out of the gate. Suarez was hurt. So a lot of reasons that contributed to that. But we have started to play better. And I do think that our guys can know that they can get there. And it's interesting because you always want to win your division, right? So there's an advantage to that. But I know myself, thinking back, I think I've been with clubs 5 times to the World Series. 2 of them have won the division. 3 have been as wild cards. So you have to keep it in perspective. So I don't think you want to do things down the stretch if you don't have to. That pushes you to have to get over that hump to try to win it. If you can get in it as the wild card and you're set your club up and you're healthy at that particular time, you have to win 2 more games than the other clubs that win the division. But it's a very doable situation. And I think that's the way the game is set up. I go all the way back to 97. It's funny, when I was with the Marlins, and you two might be able to relate to that because you're a couple that have been in the game for a long time. But we finished way behind the Braves that year. We ended up beating them in the postseason and advancing from there in best of 7 at that time. And so good clubs, if you have good clubs and you can play well at the right time, the right guys get hot. I do think we have the type of pitching staff that when they're throwing the ball well can keep runs off the board by any club. I think our bullpen has those capabilities. And I think, it's hard to hit good pitching no matter who it is and who you are. But you're in a position that we have as many good hitters can handle good pitching as about anybody when they're swinging well. So if you get in, anything can happen.
You know, you've had quite a long career, as have Joel and I. Four teams winning the pennant, won the World Series, obviously, in a couple places. One place you didn't win the World Series was Detroit, where you built a fantastic team with two players we know very well, leading things, along with, of course, Miguel Cabrera, but Verlander and Scherzer. What do you recall from that time? I think, Verlander answered very maturely when we asked about the relationship of those two back then. And he said, we're both young and trying to find our way. So basically admitting they weren't very close. What do you recall about their relationship, that team? And I mean, you can't have regrets about your career. It's been fantastic, but that looked like a team that was built to win the World Series, and you didn't. So you have any regrets about that?
Well, I don't say regrets is a word that I use in that regard, because all you can do is try as well as you possibly can and try as hard. And we did that. We had an owner that was supportive, and Mike Ilitch gave us the ability to do that. And it just points out how hard it is to win. I mean, to win a championship, because we won a division 4 years in a row, 11, 12, 13, 14, and we went to the World Series, 2006. We were competitive year in and year out. And so I think to me, it's the biggest, I wouldn't use regret, but somewhat surprised when I look back that with some of those clubs, we never won the World Series, because we were very talented. Two Hall of Fame pitchers, with being in a position, we talk about Verlander and Scherzer. We also had guys like Rick Porcello, who won a Cy Young, David Price, who won a Cy Young. They were all on the staff at the same time. Anibal Sanchez led the league in earned run average. Doug Fister was a great pitcher. Our position, we were among the league leaders in runs scored almost every year. We had a future Hall of Famer, Triple Crown winner, Miguel Cabrera, but we just didn't win it at the right time. We got to the World Series or the postseason, and we got beat by, again, all good clubs. So I think in Verlander and Scherzer, the way I would describe them at that point, both younger, but also both very competitive, right? Both A personalities at that point that drove them both, and they were competitive against one another. So I don't think that led them to be close by any means, but I will say that anytime they took the mound on those days, we felt really good about it, and they were pulling for each other. So we just had some great clubs, and unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to win the whole thing.
Dave, as a way to wrap up, I wonder if we can talk just a little bit about the team that Scherzer and Verlander play for now. I remember standing in the visiting dugout in New York. You and I were talking about 2 months ago, and like you were struggling, they were struggling, and I was asking you about both teams. And I think we both thought that both of you were going to be fine. We were 50% right. You're fine, and the Mets are going to be sellers here. Again, I think if we go back to spring training, we thought this was going to be a 3-team race. We didn't imagine maybe the Marlins where they are. Maybe this is why we love sports. It doesn't come with a script. What do you think about what's going on with the Mets? This is a team with about a $377 million payroll for luxury tax purposes.
Well, that's a tough one to answer, because I've learned a long time ago that unless you're sitting there involved in an organization, it's a lot easier to say from outside what you think will go on. They're a very talented group of players. There's no doubt. Of course, they were hit with some injuries. That always hurts you. And then once you get in a spiral, maybe things don't go your way. It's hard to get out of it sometimes. So, we're fortunate we pulled out of it. So hard. They got a great manager. Buck Showalter's been around a long time, handled it. Some great players. So I really can't answer that, because I would have thought they were in a position that we'd be sitting here at the same time talking about them being part of this. And who knows? I don't know what happens, because I've seen things happen before where all said, oh, they're done. And all of a sudden that club's sitting in the postseason and you're sitting at home watching them. So you have to be really careful about that.
Yeah, people said that about your team last year. I can remember, I think it was Steve Phillips said you guys were done on our air on MLB Network. So,
I remember Steve saying that. I reminded him of that.
I'm sure
maybe that's
did.
why you're sitting there and Steve sits next to us on a TV set.
And he said it this year too. I heard him say it again earlier in the year. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Well, it is going to be interesting, Dave. Your team has pulled out of whatever funk it was in early in the season. It's been one of the better teams in the sport for almost 2 months now. You're going to be buyers, and that means you're busy. And we appreciate you finding a few moments to join John and I on the show.
Thanks. Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. Good to see you guys.
We thank Dave Dombrowski for joining us. He was a hit. John, do you have a hit or an error?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little negative right now. I'm going to go error and wonder what Aaron Boone was thinking pitching to Shohei Ohtani, who's the greatest player in the world now and maybe ever. When you have a base open, what he said sounded logical, but not really, because everybody knew what Ohtani was going to do. So, Boone's not having a great year, and the Yankees really are not either. But that was a particularly notable move, I thought.
Yeah, I'm going to give an error to Derek Jeter, who didn't say anything interesting pretty much for a quarter of a century as either a player for 20 years or an executive with the Marlins for 5. And then suddenly he's doing hot takes on television where he's saying the Yankees should go get Juan Soto. But he at least had the office and wore the suit. Like, if you're going to go and say the Yankees should go get Juan Soto, you have to explain to me exactly why the other teams wouldn't get him instead of the Yankees and what the Yankees would have to give up. I mean, for example, the Nationals gave up C.J. Abrams as probably the third or fourth best guy in the trade that got Soto. C.J. Abrams is outplaying Anthony Volpe this year. So the trade begins where Anthony Volpe is the third or fourth piece in it. To me, do the Yankees have better pieces than Anthony Volpe to convince A.J. Preller to give them Juan Soto for a year and a half? I mean, what are we talking about here? And then David Ortiz, superstar DH, comes in with the Red Sox should get Ohtani. Yeah, everyone should get Ohtani. I understand this is the media world now, but can somebody say for what? Why Boston instead of like every team that has more prospects? Can we, I mean, especially Jeter, who never really kind of went to a hot take world. It was really interesting to me to see him do the hot take.
Yeah, thank you for that error. I'm in full agreement, and it should have a disclaimer when Derek Jeter's talking about player moves that he spent $53 million on Avisail Garcia. So to make him an expert now on player moves, I think is ridiculous. And, Ortiz is just a cackling Red Sox fan, and that's basically the extent of what he does for them. A-Rod is, and we've had him on the show, and of course we give preference to anybody who's been on the show, but he's by far the best guy they got in that group.
A-Rod, voice of reason.
Hey,
I think you're the voice of reason on the show. Which,
I got to be honest. I mean, he does more than cackle. He's an experienced TV guy. He was on our show. He was fantastic on our show. The guy is good in that setting. I mean, I got to give it. I mean, he and I are not close friends, but I got to give it up to him. He's the shining star right there.
Yeah, I think it's a low bar. So hopefully it's a high bar to listen to us, the show, a podcast from the New York Post. It's made better every week by our producers, Andrew Hartz and Jake Brown. So we always thank them for helping us. This show drops on the Yes app about Wednesday noon every week. Please do that. Don't forget to rate, review us, follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Really, those reviews do matter for us. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating and join us every week on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman.